Hello, and welcome back to my episode-by-episode analysis of Frieren. I'm still catching up to episode 4 where I left off when it first aired, but after that, I'll be going into these episodes blind. As with last time, I made some changes to my editing again. I didn't change quite as much, but I'm still learning and trying to improve my videos, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd let me know what you think. Before we get into things, I also stream. I try to stream every week on Fridays in the evening, and I'm currently trying to finish Elden Ring. If that sounds fun to you, I hope that you can make it and come hang out. So in the last episode, after Hyder passes away, Frieren takes Fern under her wing and continues her journey. I noted that Fern seemed to have some gripes about how they're spending their time, and how Frieren could be doing so much more for the world. It also felt like she may have some grievances being kind of the responsible one in their group, when Frieren is supposed to be her master. Let's see how this episode develops their dynamic. The episode opens up with a scenic background shot telling us where and when we are. When it does this, it always references how many years it's been since Himmel the hero's passing. The series hasn't made it clear whether there's an in-world era system, kind of like how we have BCE and CE, but it's interesting to consider that they might use like before Himmel's death and after Himmel's death. But anyway, in the first episode, we learned that Frieren meets Fern 20 years after Himmel's passing. Then, in episode 2, we see that Hyder collapses and likely passes away in the 24th year. Their Blue Moon flower hunt is in the 26th year, and at the start of episode 3, it's the 27th year. So in summary, the two have known each other for around 7 years in total, and it's been about 2 to 3 years of traveling together. I just wanted to take the chance to organize all that because I think it gives important context to the events that follow in the episode. After that, the series shows us this cat and these two seagulls. After how the last episode kind of made use of the seed rats, I might be paying too much attention now to whenever animals are shown on the screen, but I think it's clear that they make use of them. First, I'd like to point out that Fern's pout here is very cute. She was rather taciturn when with Frieren in episodes 1 and 2, and I feel like she only really showed emotion with when she was with Hyder, but maybe she's starting to open up. I think it's also worth mentioning that this is the first time in the series we've actually gotten access to Fern's inner thoughts. Admittedly, with the added context of Frieren's past purchases that they show here, well, I guess it's clear that Fern's distrust is warranted. I'm curious what Frieren intended to do with that solution that melts clothing, but let's move on from that for now. Anyway, the real highlight is the history book that Fern admits wasn't entirely unnecessary, but just the fact that she lumped it in with the other stuff tells us how she feels about it. We also know that despite Frieren urging her to read it multiple times through the episode, she only does so after the importance of history is demonstrated. After Frieren goes, we cut back to the seagulls from before. The two seagulls here seem to represent the pair, showing that Fern feels like she's been left behind. Of course, with the power of hindsight, we know what it is that Frieren is shopping for, but this scene really highlights how Fern sees her. She never thought that Frieren was interested in fashion, but even then she assumes that Frieren is shopping for herself here. As I noted at the start of the video, they've known each other for around 7 years now, and they've been traveling together for 3. I think this implies that in those years, Frieren hasn't ever once given Fern a gift. I think the book doesn't quite count because it's meant to be for Fern's education, so if she's never gotten a gift before, I think that explains why she wouldn't even consider the possibility of getting one now. But that also means that this is the first time in 7 whole years that she's seen Frieren worry this much. And I think that's really heartwarming since we do know that she's doing her best to pick something that Fern will like. The series gives us another scene highlighting Fern's love for animals. I think I might actually start keeping account of how many times she interacts with animals. In the last episode, we saw her helping the seed rats, patting the big turtle on its head, and now playing with the cat here, for a total count of 3. While it doesn't end up happening, I did consider the chance that she might actually lose sight of Frieren while preoccupied with the cat. The way Fern just perks up at the mention of sweets is really cute, but I think this also shows that she has, no trust for Frieren. I guess to clarify, I would assume she trusts Frieren as a mage and her instructor, but I just mean for, the day-to-day lifestyle things. I do have the benefit of hindsight rewatching this scene for the purpose of making my video, but I think the show makes it pretty obvious that they're kind of heavily playing into the thug trope in order to flip it on us. It turns out that Frieren actually assumed that they were thugs too. I thought she might actually know what was up there because she didn't hesitate at all to go in and ask, but that doesn't seem to be it. I guess regardless, even if they were thugs and they tried to pull something, Frieren's probably strong enough to fend them off. So ultimately, her combat and life experience may be what allowed her to be so casual about this. I think Frieren's voice here as she asks this question sounds a lot stiffer than it usually is. We can also see that as she walks from her bed to the balcony, both of her arms are actually going back and forth in sync rather than alternating. On her way back out, her arms are alternating now, but it's animated to feel stiff and exaggerated. In general, I think that Frieren isn't really one to waste energy, so I find it strange that she got up from her bed, walked to the balcony, which is actually away from the door, and then walked back basically out of the room. My best guess is that walking to the balcony might have been part of some sort of script that Frieren came up with. Also, it should be noted that Fern is still sorting out the items she bought for them, and doesn't even get to give Frieren an answer before Frieren closes the door on her way out. The whole exchange is extremely stilted. I kind of wondered if Frieren might have noticed that Fern was tailing her, or at least thought that something was up when Fern got home late, but I guess this confirms that Frieren was oblivious. This also shows us Fern's character, because there was no need for her to take the initiative to apologize here, but she does anyway, because she feels like she's done something wrong. They don't tell us where Frieren got this money, but I want to think that she just somehow found the time to earn some secret money without Fern knowing, basically just so that she could surprise Fern here. The thought of that is very heartwarming to me. Although we don't know the actual source, I think it's safe to assume that the money didn't come from any chests. Fern may not trust Frieren, especially not with their finances, but she sure does know Frieren well. Frieren's disappointment makes it clear that even though she presents herself as aloof, she does actually want to get to know people better. Fern showing how well she knows Frieren, when Frieren can't quite reciprocate, might actually make Frieren feel insecure that basically despite her efforts to do better with Fern this time, she may be repeating what happened with the hero's party. I really like how understanding all of the party members are in this scene. We only really get to see little bits here and there of their adventure and their interactions, but I think it's clear that while they may butt heads sometimes, they have a solid dynamic. Here, I just wanted to point out really quickly again that Hyder is the butt of the joke. I'm kind of curious if the series will give us any flashbacks to whether or not Frieren tried to give gifts to her party. If not, the gesture here shows huge growth in Frieren and her proactivity in wanting to get closer and learn more about Fern. A random thought, but if she never gave anyone in the hero's party gifts before, Himmel might have actually considered that evil horn that she entrusted him with as a gift. We and Fern know just how much effort and thought Frieren put into her choice. Admittedly, Frieren only knows as a result of her distrust, and because she chose to stalk Frieren, but I guess that kind of all worked out for the better.
フリーレン様はどうしようもないほどに鈍い方のようなので、はっきりと伝えます。
I've already been saying it, but the series goes out of its way to even have Frieren say it explicitly. Putting aside the accessory itself and whether or not it suits Friern's tastes, she doesn't actually indicate one way or the other, I guess. It's about the effort that she knows Frieren put in to make this day and her gift special.
知ろうとしただけなのに。
This is just a bit of a translation nitpick, but here Frieren says,
知ろうとしただけなのに。
which more directly translates to, even though all I did was try to learn. I think I didn't do anything special though. It does well enough to capture the nuance that Frieren is downplaying her efforts and doesn't feel they're enough to warrant appreciation. But to Fern, and to us viewers too, I think it's clear that everything about what Frieren's tried to do for Fern today was special. We briefly get to see Fern putting the hairpiece on before the scene once again cuts to the seagulls as they leave together.
ところでフリーレン様、この旅って何か目的はあるんですか?
Fern asks Frieren what the purpose of her journey is. I think this implies that in the 3 years that they've been traveling together now, she's not once asked this question. Frieren goes on to explain that she doesn't have a specific purpose in mind, but she does want to trace the trails of her journey with the hero's party. In the last episode, Fern seemed pretty focused on Frieren's shortcomings. Perhaps that's just what Fern had tunneled on due to her frustrations. But in this episode, with Frieren's awkward attempt to celebrate her birthday and the way she answers this question, I think Fern comes to understand that despite Frieren's shortcomings, she is trying.
それはフリーレン様にとって大切なことなのでございますね。
In all of the scenes we've had where Frieren and Fern walk together, Fern has always followed shortly behind. Here, she finally catches up to walk by Frieren's side. We also see Frieren pat Fern's head, confirming that she's become taller, and I don't think we've actually seen any skinship like this between the two until now. The events in the first half of the episode have definitely helped the two grow closer together. I'm not really sure if this is an important detail or not, but I guess Frieren is actually conscious about her figure. I agreed with Fern earlier in the episode when she mentioned not thinking that Frieren was concerned about things like fashion, but I'm just gonna file this away in case it leads to something in a later episode. As I mentioned in the last episode, we don't really get a lot of details for how Frieren teaches Fern, so I think it's really nice to get to see little things like this. I think it's kind of scary to think what might have happened if Fern hadn't successfully made the shield. The beam looked pretty big, so I don't think Frieren could have, seen visually, at least, if Fern had managed to succeed or not. So maybe she knew that Fern succeeded because she could detect the shift in mana. Alternatively, this may also just show Frieren's confidence, either in Fern's abilities that she'd succeed, or in her own ability to cancel her attack in time if something were to happen. We get another peek here into Frieren's teaching style. Sometimes she may give direction, advice, or confirmation, but she presents what the problem is and allows Fern to come to her own answers. I really like this. This scene with the logs highlights their differences again, perhaps in their personalities or just their life experience. Frieren maintains a slow and steady pace. She's stable as she gets onto the log and all the way across. Fern wobbles for a bit at first, but the moment she finds her footing, she actually rushes to catch up. I'm not entirely sure what to infer from this, but perhaps because Fern's birthday also happens in this episode, there are multiple references of her being mature or like a big girl now. After Hyder passed away, and even before then, I think she was always rushing toward maturity so she could put Hyder at ease. But perhaps even now, after, becoming an adult essentially, she still feels pressured to catch up to Frieren. Fern reveals that she hasn't been reading the book that Frieren got her, and Frieren actually offers to read it for her. I don't know how much it would cost to pay voice actors to do full audiobook readings, but storytime with Frieren sounds like it would be very good vibes.
もしやフリーレン様ですかな?
なんで知ってるの?
Considering how long it's been since the original party's adventures, and the fact that Himmel and Hyder have already passed, it makes sense that the old man is the only one there who seems to really recognize Frieren. This also goes to show that even if history is recorded, unless it's actually taught and passed down, that history and the lessons learned from it are prone to be lost. It immediately stands out to me that they had to seal Qual, but were able to defeat the Demon King. There's a lot of speculation that can be done just knowing those facts. My first thought is that Qual was simply stronger than the Demon King. It's a simple answer, but it also begs another question. Why didn't Qual take the role of Demon King for himself then? I think the most reasonable answer is that the Demon King had ambitions to organize the attack to conquer the world. While Qual might have been stronger, he was actually just content serving the king, or he didn't want to bother with the administrative side of stuff. It's kind of like how some employees will fervently deny promotions into managerial positions, even if it means forgoing higher pay. Another thought is that in kind of these stories about heroes and demon lords, a mechanic that's relatively prevalent is that the hero will have a specific blessing or something from the god or goddess of the world that specifically works against the demon lord. As a result, even if the hero's party is able to defeat the demon king, that power might not have worked against Qual. Finally, it could just have been a matter of timing. They might have run into Qual in the middle of their journey before they were really ready to deal with him, but they would have only confronted the Demon King at the very end of their journey. While I think this is reasonable, the episode goes on to give us more information that I think disproves that. I'll discuss that further when we get to it. So here, Frieren says she's come to defeat Qual and not reseal him. Not only does she have a smaller party now with just her and Fern, their party isn't as balanced as it was before either. Right now, there's only 2 mages in the party, where her previous one had a tank, healer, and 2 DPS. You know, the standard FF14 light party. I guess the episode hints that Fern is meant to serve as their front line now, as Frieren has recently been teaching her defense magic. This all suggests that the hero's party wouldn't have been able to defeat Qual even after defeating the Demon King. But now, Frieren has either grown a lot stronger, or something's changed that will allow the pair to defeat him easily. Of course, I have the benefit of hindsight in making this analysis, but I really do think it's great that the series offers us so many little hints and details along the way. Frieren goes on to ask why the old man knew that she was coming. He explains that Himmel continued to visit pretty much every year until he passed away. I also want to note that this little altar here has fresh offerings on it, suggesting that someone, probably the old man, still tends to it regularly.
来ない白状者だと。冷たいよね。
This confirms that Himmel was always waiting for Frieren to visit him.
でも、村を見捨てるほど白状ではない。
Despite the fact that she rarely did, and perhaps the only time she actually did was for the Era meteor shower that they made a promise for, he still held immense trust that she would remember this village and take care of Qual. I think this is evidence that the hero's party would not have been able to deal with Qual before. Himmel continued to visit the seal every year, meaning that he never forgot about it, and from what I understand about his personality, if he knew that they were able to deal with it once and for all, he absolutely would have gathered the group to take care of things earlier on. In other words, the new developments in magic were absolutely necessary. And watching this scene also kind of just made me tear up. I think I just felt touched seeing the unconditional trust that Himmel gives to Frieren, even after all of that time that they spent apart. Fern doesn't mention anything to Frieren, but her body language makes it obvious that she's scared, and I think that's fair enough. If I had stood face to face with Qual, I think I'd be terrified. Frieren goes on to explain just how terrifying Qual and his spell Soultrag are. As she does so, she's shown flipping through a book, and I presume this is the magic history book that she actually wanted Fern to read, basically implying that all of the answers could have been found in there.
本当に魔法師読んでいないんだね。やっぱり読み聞かせようか。
Here, the series spells it out for us. If Fern had read the book, it would have been like she'd read a spoiler thread. She'd have all of the answers she'd need, and she wouldn't be as worried about their encounter tomorrow.
たった80年か。
私たちにとってはね。
When Frieren tells Qual how long it's been, his answer makes it clear that he and Frieren perceive time in similar ways. But Frieren's response makes a clear distinction. After seeing what humans were able to accomplish in those 80 years, and having spent more time with them herself, she's come to understand that 80 years is actually a long time by human standards.
魔王様は
殺した。
そうでは
I find it interesting how casual Qual is about getting revenge. As far as I can tell, he doesn't seem to see it as a big deal. I think this further supports that he's stronger than the Demon King, as even though the Demon King's already been long defeated, he seems confident.
わずか数年でゾルトラークは人類の魔法体系に組み込まれ
Frieren finally explains what the human researchers were able to accomplish in 80 years. This again highlights the difference of what 80 years means to the different species. I don't know if the show will go further into this, but it didn't seem that Frieren actually helped the researchers or anything either. Frieren might have been okay just coming back to the village every 80 years or so and reapplying the seal, at least until some eventual breakthrough was made. As an elf, she actually has the luxury of that time. But the human magicians, threatened by this demon and his spell that was only sealed away temporarily, came together to find a solution. Qual is immediately able to analyze the spell and figure out its weakness. It even shows him replicating it after only seeing Fern cast it once. I think this might mean that demons have a natural talent for magic, or it could just be Qual who's the exception. I do think based on how he was introduced, it's likely the latter, and I'm not sure how to say this, but he kind of just has this very casual swagger to the way he carries himself. We get a beautifully animated fight sequence that ends with Frieren taking to the skies before using Qual's own attack spell against him. Qual seems surprised that Frieren was able to use his spell, but he shouldn't be, because Frieren literally just explained that over time it became a standard attack spell. I'm not sure if he was surprised because he didn't believe Frieren when she explained it, or if he just hadn't processed the implications. Given that he was able to replicate the defense spell, I think the fact that he didn't make use of it shows his hubris. Even if he thought Frieren might use another spell, Qual recognized the complexity of the defense spell. Considering he's been sealed away for 80 years now, it's likely the best defense spell in his arsenal. The confidence that he'd need to think he'd be able to deal with Frieren's attack without relying on it results in his end here. Having experienced the value of history firsthand now, we see Fern actually reading the book.
お前私のスカートめくったクソガキだな
And then we close out with some nice comedic relief where we find out that the old man was actually that little brat, I guess.
私の見せてあげますから。
うわ
And we see Heider volunteer himself again to be the butt of the joke.
直接の感謝じゃないよこの村の人たちはヒンメルを信じていたんだ
I'm not sure what to think of what Frieren says here. I agree that the villagers believed in Himmel, and that's probably why they stayed, waiting for Frieren to come. But I think they are still directly thankful to Frieren for actually coming. I am starting to notice a pattern though, where Frieren seems to downplay her efforts and contributions. Perhaps in her long life, nothing feels like it's a big deal anymore. There might be something more to it that I'm not seeing, and if you have a different interpretation, I'd like to hear what you think. Oh, but of course, if the series does actually go on to develop the idea, I ask that you don't spoil me.
よくわかりませんがヒンメル様はフリーレン様を信じていたのだと思いますよ
It looks like Fern's with me in not quite understanding the specific distinction that Frieren's trying to make here. But yes, as I mentioned before, it's clear that Himmel trusts Frieren, and thinking about that trust is a little sad, but also very touching. It definitely took a number of years, but overall it feels like Frieren and Fern have grown visibly closer over these last 2 episodes. I feel like this episode addressed a lot of the things that I felt may have been giving Fern grief. Rather than taking another odd job for yet another useless spell, the pair went to dispose of Qual, a very significant and important task that had been entrusted to Frieren. The concerns I had about Fern seeming more like Frieren's caretaker than apprentice were alleviated too. Not entirely, of course, because we clearly see that Fern is the responsible one. She properly dries Frieren's hair and manages their finances. As far as I can tell, she doesn't seem to mind it as much as I thought though, so that's reassuring. It was also nice getting to see how Frieren actually teaches Fern. This reassures me that while Frieren might be like a bit of a bum lifestyle-wise, she is doing what she needs to do as Fern's master. I also like how the series has included animals and used them in various ways. Like, it's not super significant or anything so far, but it signals that if something's on the screen, there's a reason for it. I guess to be fair, I'm not sure the cat really had any deeper meaning to it than giving Fern a distraction in that one scene. But if you notice something that I didn't, please let me know. I also feel that it's really impressive how magic developed so much in the 80 years that Qual was sealed. Qual's exclusive spell, Soultrag, was so devastating it killed 40% of adventurers and 70% of mages. That spell was not only countered, it was assimilated. Now it's just a basic attack spell that any mage has in their arsenal. I find that really interesting because my impression was that things would actually have gone in the opposite direction. With the threat of the Demon King gone and a new era of peace, I think it would have been more natural for people to get complacent. But I guess even though the Demon King was gone, the magicians and researchers involved in this project, I guess, knew that Qual was still a pending threat. He was just sealed, he wasn't gone. Maybe the general public really had gotten complacent, and we just didn't get to see that because it wasn't a focus for the episode. Finally, at the end of the episode, it reveals that the old man in the village was actually the little brat that flipped over Frieren's skirt. From the shot we get at the end showing the villagers thanking Frieren, he seemed to be the oldest one there. Earlier, Frieren states that she wants to follow the trail of her journey with Himmel and Co. before that trail fades. I think this puts that into context. I don't know how many years that old man has left, but Frieren may have just barely made it in time to retrace that part of the journey. I'm a little worried that as the show goes on, she'll end up showing up a little too late. Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. My videos are clearly getting longer, and I'm actually feeling a little self-conscious about that. Do you think I might be yapping too much? I might try to cut back a little bit and be a bit more selective about what I include in my videos. Even if I might have yapped for too long, I really hope that you enjoyed the video. As always, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in getting notifications either for my new videos or when I go live for my stream, hitting the bell will set that up. Please don't hesitate to comment either. I just ask, again, that you avoid spoiling me. If you enjoy the content I put out or my translations, please consider supporting me on Ko-Fi. I'll put a link on the screen and you can also find it in the description below. To close out, a quick reminder to take care of yourself and maybe get up for a stretch or a bit of a walk. Winter is quickly approaching where I am, so I've been trying to make sure to get out for walks while I still can. I'll keep doing my best as always, and I hope to see you back for the next one.